to bring the lost to Jesus for membership in his family, to develop them into Christ-like maturity, to equip them for Christ's ministry on earth, to improve their quality of life, to be a ministry to the total man. First Samuel chapter 15, let's commence at verse 22. And Samuel said, hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath also rejected thee from being king. And Saul said unto Samuel, I've sinned, for I have transgressed the commandments of the Lord and thy words, because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. Now therefore I pray thee, pardon my sin, and turn again with me, that I may worship the Lord. Samuel said to Saul, I will not return with thee, for thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord hath rejected thee from being king over Israel. And as Samuel turned about to go away, he laid hold upon the skirt of his mantle and rent it. He ripped it. And Samuel said unto him, the Lord hath rent the kingdom of Israel from thee this day, and hath given it to a neighbor of thine that is better than thee. Skip to verse 35, the last verse in the chapter. And Samuel came no more to see Saul until the day of his death. Nevertheless, Samuel mourned for Saul, and the Lord repented that he had made Saul king over Israel. The subject is fired, but still on the job. Did you catch that? Fired, but you're still on the job. To be fired is to be dismissed, an employee from a job. Let them go or dismiss them from work. Now, God is the only employer that I know that will dismiss you and let you stay on the job. I believe a lot of that's going on in the church world today. Now, the reason for that is simply because God calls us. But let me talk about myself. If I work for an employee or employer and continue to break his rules or her rules, they might give me a warning. Yeah, they may warn me, and sometimes they may give you, well, today I believe they give you points. Otherwise, that's called grace. They are warning you to let you know if you just keep doing the same thing. That, like Donald Trump says, you fired. We as believers are described as the elect of God. When we are elected, that means we are chosen. Notice Isaiah, the 45th chapter and verse 4. It says, for Jacob my servant's sake and Israel my elect, I have called thee by thy name. I have surnamed thee, though thou dost not even know me. Otherwise, God says, I have given you a surname. Help me say a surname. A surname is an inherited name that is commonplace to every member of a particular family. If you are a Wells, that's my surname. I inherited that name. I inherited because my daddy was a Wells. Are you with me? So therefore, it's inherited and it's commonplace to every Wells that is a part of the lineage of Richard Wells. So God is saying, listen, I have given you, when I chose you, Israel, I have given you a surname. You got the surname even though you don't even know me. You have not even followed my principles, but still because of the covenant that I have with your fathers, I have included you. And let me take a side step. Children that are born into holiness, they just can't get away with everything that other young folks get away with. There are many of you under the sound of my voice because you've been introduced to God and you know the ways of God. You allow your friends and your peers to influence you in the wrong way when deep down in your heart you know better. You got a surname, and that surname is holiness. Holiness is something that you were literally born into, even though you have to adopt it yourself. Can I talk to you for a minute? When you look at that Old Testament, you always hear them say, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Why? Because it's a surname. Because God had chosen Abraham. The blessings of Abraham was to pass to each generation. But when you look at the sacred scriptures in chapter 26 of Genesis, you will find that Isaac had to renew the covenant of his father. Then when Isaac stepped off of the scene, he had some twin boys. Though that youngest of them, his name was Jacob. Jacob, whose name was later changed to Israel. But yet you find in the 28th chapter that even though Jacob didn't practice and he was contrary, he was a trickster. His name means surplanter. A trickster, but because he was a part of the Abrahamic seed, the blessings of Abraham was passed to him. But he had to meet God and make a commitment for himself. So God told Israel, he said, listen, I've given you a surname. You have inherited the blessings of Abraham, and you've inherited because I have chose you. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 7 and verse 6. He says, for thou art a holy people unto thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the earth. And I hear some of you, so-called biblical theologians, and I hear you saying in your mind, yeah, Bishop, that's Old Testament. Well, let's take a look at the new. 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse number 9. But ye are a chosen generation. You are a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people. Why? You got a surname. You may want to run from it. I ain't going to talk about you, but I can talk about myself. I know how I used to be embarrassed because they used to call us sanctified folks and used to say we were holy folks and make fun of me because my daddy was a sanctified preacher. But that mock was on my life and didn't care how I tried to run from it. I couldn't get no peace. Almost went to prison for murder, because God had called me. But when God has a way of interrupting your life because you just not like other folks. Oh, y'all don't hear me. He said, you're a peculiar people, meaning you're different, that ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. You are a chosen generation. Look at Ephesians chapter 1 and verse 4. Says, according as he hath chosen us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and without blame before him in love. Jesus tells you no man can come unto me except the Father draws him. It's God that gives you the mind to want to live saved. That's why when you're living for God, you certainly ought to be thankful. Because the writer, Paul, says he places within us the will and the do of his good pleasure. There's so many people that don't have a mind, but I thank God for the mind. Will y'all help me teach my lesson? Tell your neighbor, say, neighbor, I thank God for the mind. I don't live saved because I got to. I don't live saved because that's the only thing I know how to do. I have made a choice. And when I look at life, I have come to the conclusion Jesus is the best thing that's ever happened to me. How about you today? Can you talk back to me? Say, Jesus is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Sometimes it's good for you to look back over your shoulder and remember where God has brought you from. Because when you stop to look at a whole lot of your friends, all the guys I used to run with are buried and dead and died early lives. When I say early, they were dying when they were in their 40s, in their 50s. They died before their time. God draws us in different ways. He draws. The Apostle Paul interrupted his life on the Damascus road and transformed his life. Our text today is built on the life of King Saul, the first king of Israel. Eli, let's take a look at it. Eli was, if you please, the 13th judge of Israel. Eli now was dead. But let me just back up and give you a little history. God called them out of Egypt under Moses. Moses takes them into the wilderness. And when he takes them into the wilderness, he separates them out there all by themselves. Gives them the mind of God. And then God turns around when Moses failed God. God told him, I'm not going to let you go to the promised land, but I want you to take your hands and I want you to lay your hands on Joshua. Otherwise, the laying on of hands, even when we do it today, is the imparting of the Spirit of God on his people. So Joshua then crossed the Jordan, led them on into the promised land, and after the death of Joshua, are y'all with me? God changed and they begin to be ruled by judges. And so you get to the 13th judge. The 13th judge, his name was Eli. Eli had two sons. Their names was Hophni and Phinehas. God wiped them out, killed them, and the daddy died. And there was a young boy raised by Eli by the name of Samuel. Samuel also in many ways was just like Eli, because even though Samuel loved God and carried out all of the practices of God, he had two boys, and them two boys, he made them judges in Israel. Sometimes we want our children to walk in our footsteps, and those boys were like Eli's sons. The Bible said they took bribes and they took filthy lucre. God did not kill Samuel like he did Eli. He did not kill Samuel's two sons. But God came to Samuel through the elders of Israel. Can I talk to you? The elders of Israel looked at Samuel and said to him, Samuel, give us a king. We want a king. Your boys are corrupt. We don't want to follow them. And so Samuel felt bad about that. And he went to God about it. And God told him, he said, Samuel, the people are not refusing you, but they're refusing me. There are times when we want to worship God on our own merit. But God says you got to do it my way or no way. God doesn't need any assistance. He doesn't need any help. So God told him, he said, listen, they're not refusing you, Samuel, but they're refusing me. Matter of fact, I have already called a young Benjamite by the name of Saul. He is a son of Cush. Are you with me? Now, Cush had this boy who the Bible describes as being shoulders above every other man. Well, now, Saul was told by his daddy Cush. He said, now listen, I've lost my mules. I want you to get a servant and you all go find my mules. So they went out to hunt for the mules, and while they were hunting, God speaks to Samuel and told Samuel, he said, listen, there's going to be a young man that's coming and he's going to be looking for some mules. And God told Samuel, this is the young man that I want you to anoint king over Israel. Y'all so quiet. This is the young man that I want to walk in your footsteps. So then here we find young Saul and one of his father's servants. They're looking for the mules, and they'd gone throughout all of Israel, and they couldn't find the mules. They kept looking for the mules, and it became 1 day, 2 days, and they couldn't find the mule. And so Saul says to his young servant, he says, if we can just find the man of God, because this man of God has a reputation that whatever he tells you is going to be the truth. So the Bible says that they went to the holy city and they looked up and found this man. And they said to the man, they said, we're looking for the seer. Because in those days they didn't call them prophets. Said, we're looking for the seer. And Samuel said, I am the one you're looking for. Matter of fact, you come on to my house. Matter of fact, I don't want y'all to worry anymore about the mules. The things that you've been looking for has already been found. He kept Saul for overnight and fed him like he was a king. And then the next morning, he gets up and Saul is getting ready to leave. He turns around and tells Saul, send your servants ahead. Let them go. But you stay here. I got something to talk to you about. And he begins to explain to him about his father Kish, and that how his father had found his mules. But God has sent you to me because he is going to anoint you to be king over Israel. And Saul couldn't believe it, because Saul says, I'm just a Benjamite. I'm not one from one of the great tribes. Why would you choose me? Samuel tells him, God has chosen you. This is why I can't help but love God. God is able to look beyond your shortcomings. He's able to look beyond your weaknesses, and he's able to see the good inside of you and able to make something out of you. That's why I can't help but love God, because the God of the Bible can make something out of nothing. Are y'all with me today? He then goes on and takes the oil and he anoints him to be king over Israel. But this is when trouble started. When he anointed him to be king over Israel, the next day he met with the elders and he met with Israel. And when he met with them, there was a group of people, the men of Jahash. The men of Jahash said, we ain't gonna let this man be our king. Can this man save us? Sometimes people know too much about you. And when they know your past, they want to try to block your future. And so these men, because they knew Saul's past, they said, this man can't save us. So what the men of Jabesh did, they went to the king Nahash. Nahash was the king of the Amalekites. And they went to the king of the Amalekites and they said, will you be our king? Will you make a covenant with us? Are y'all with me? He said, yes, I'll make a covenant with you, but it's upon one condition. That one condition is you got to let me pluck out your right eye. I will be your king, but you got to let me pluck out your right eye. And the reason I want to pluck out your right eye, because I want it to be a testimony against Israel. You see, that's what the devil wants to do to God's people. He wants to make a mockery out of your life. Sometimes God will do things that you don't like, and you will then get angry with God. But God will allow you to make some crazy decisions and cause some crazy things to come on your life because you were too proud to say yes to his will and yes to his word. Will you help me teach and say, yes, Lord? That's all God wants from us is a yes, Lord. The men of Nahash said, well, listen, we give us 7 days. We gonna think about your offer. Give us 7 days. And so they went back home and they began to tell their neighbors about it. And the word passed through Israel and finally got to Saul. And when Saul got this message, Saul took a yoke of oxen. Took that yoke of oxen, and the Bible said he cut that yoke of oxen in pieces and turned around and got messengers. Are y'all still with me? He got messengers, and the messengers traveled through all of the coasts of Israel, and they were giving this message, said, you better meet with Saul and Samuel. Got to meet with Saul and Samuel because we're going to make war with the Amalekites. They want to pluck out the eyes of some of our people. I want you to know that's what the devil wants to do. The devil wants to take some of us and pluck out our eyes so we can't see the goodness of God, so we can't see what God has done for us. Whatever you do, don't you let the devil blind your eyes, because through it all, God is still good to us. Whatever is going on in your life, it could be worse. So I'm going to learn how to give God thanks and praise even in the midst of what I'm going through. The Bible says that God moved on the men of Israel, and over 300,000 of them, and 30,000 of them from the tribe of Judah. They met with Saul, and when they met with Saul and Samuel, the Bible said that they overrun the Amalekites and they destroyed them.